There is one story that I always like to tell people when talking about Dragon Nest. Way back when I was a dumb 14-year-old playing this game for the first time, for some incomprehensible reason it took me embarrassingly long to figure out how to use my skills. So, up until this very dungeon, I would just beat up every enemy in my way to death with my staff. Eventually, I did finally figure out how to use my skills. But sometimes I wonder, what if I didn't? The goal of this challenge is simple, but the challenge will not be. My objective is to reach the max level of 99, but I'm only allowed to defeat enemies by giving them blunt force trauma. Now, before I can actually begin the challenge, first I have to establish all of its rules and details. For example, out of all 10 classes Dragon Nest has to offer, which one will I pick? Well, it definitely won't be Wanda. Yeah, I'm not sorry, because this absolute beta male turns literally any challenge I could possibly come up with for this game into Winnie Hut Juniors. I swear, if anyone watching this actually has a challenge that would only be hard as Wonder on their mind, please be my guest and leave it in the comments. And no, getting bitches does not count as a challenge. Anyway, which one will I pick out of all the remaining classes? Now look at me and tell me that I would ever pick anything other than Sorceress. First of all, because she's my main. And second of all, because out of every class, she was definitely not intended to be played like this. So that should hopefully make things more interesting. Also, you may have been wondering about the dungeon difficulty for this challenge. So let me get this out of the way. At first, I didn't want to restrict it, but after playing, I came to the conclusion that it wouldn't be a good idea. So I decided on this. As long as you unlock the Abyss difficulty, you're stuck with it. Until that, however, it doesn't really matter. And let me just quickly elaborate before somebody could use that sneaky exploit I almost left in. You have to unlock the Abyss difficulty by the time you reach this quest and this dungeon. What, you really thought I would allow you to just stick to easy and avoid unlocking Abyss? Huh, no. Another rule I added is that if the story quest requires you to go to the same dungeon twice, you're allowed to do it the second time on easy. But that only applies as long as you've already finished the whole dungeon on Abyss once. I may be a masochist, but I'm not insane. Now to the rules. I must say that this challenge will have a very specific and long rule set. Even more rules were added to this list as I was actually playing and figuring things out. But here are the initial ones I started with. First of all, what do I even mean by blunt force trauma? Well, I decided to define it as only dealing damage by using my mouse. In other words, I'm not allowed to use any skills that would usually go on the quick slot bar. This means that I'm only allowed to use passive skills. And just in case there's a workaround with some classes, I will get this out of the way. Active skills that could be activated with a mouse are banned. Got it? No blue allowed. Also, this buff is not blue, but it's not allowed either. Since the goal of this challenge is reaching max level, we need to establish the rules for that as well. First, I can only level up by following the main story quest, which means no goblin event. To get the full authentic leveling experience, I'm also banning account XP bonuses. That is why I'll be creating a separate account with no other characters specifically for this challenge. This also goes without saying, but party members aren't allowed either. This challenge is solo only, otherwise that will kind of defeat the purpose. I guess core blunt force trauma could be its own separate category, but that's not what I'll be doing. And the last rule for now is no heroes. Yes, I'm banning slave labor. The only exception to this rule are the times where a hero is forced to accompany you by a quest. But there's literally no other choice to progress otherwise, so I'll just have to let that one slide. So, here's the beginner rule set I had started with. Like I already mentioned, it will be expanded as we go. So, technically, if I happen to break a rule before it was added, that doesn't count. I promise I won't use this fact to my own advantage. Because advantage is the last thing I will be having here. I will be playing on the same private server where I did my farming only challenge. Kinda funny how I went from the most chill challenge you could think of to the most brutal and excruciating one. Now I even struggle to call the last one a challenge after everything I went through while making this video. I hope you're excited to see it because with everything out of the way, it's finally time to enter Mana Ridge. As you can expect, I started the challenge by creating my character. Unfortunately, my go-to nickname was taken by my main account, so I had to do its inverse. Which is honestly fitting because this challenge is gonna be all lunatic and none of the serene. First thing I tried to do as soon as I loaded into the tutorial battle was getting rid of all my skills, but I soon discovered that wasn't allowed. Turns out it was actually allowed and I just completely forgot how to do that for some reason. So the next best thing I did was moving my skill somewhere I would be less likely to accidentally press them. As soon as I entered my first dungeon, I quickly realized that my biggest obstacle would not be my lack of allowed skills. It would not even be the enemies. No, one of my biggest obstacles in this run would be my own ping. The thing is, I happen to live on the continent of Europe. That's all I'm gonna say. And at the time of me making this video, it's actually been 5 years since the official European Dragon Nest server closed down. Because of this, my only option is playing on private servers, most, if not all, of which are located in Southeast Asia, with this particular one being likely based in Indonesia. Are you guys starting to see the problem here? Anyway, despite my atrocious ping, the whole of Mana Ridge ended up being ridiculously easy. Which is not surprising. Something tells me this video is gonna end up being quite long anyway, so I will only be showing you key events from this part. What I would also like to do is make a definitive tier list of every skill at my disposal, starting with the ones I have now. Left click and right click. According to the game's controls, they are respectively called normal attack and special attack. I thought that I would end up using normal attack way more, but what I quickly discovered was that it was very hard to land an actual hit with. Compared to that, special attack ended up being far superior. It had a much wider range, which also allows for small AoE and leads to a much higher consistency. I guess that's why it's special. With that, I'm putting special attack into B and normal attack into D. Another skill that is available to me from the start is heal attack. It can only be activated if an enemy is knocked down, and so far we don't have any ways to achieve that. But when we do, it becomes the most hard-hitting skills in our arsenal. You deal a whole 500% of damage by literally stepping on your enemies. Unfortunately, it is not the most consistent, since if you accidentally move an inch or get hit, it will get cancelled. And sometimes it just decides not to work for seemingly no reason at all, which is very annoying. So, taking its flaws into consideration, I will have to place it into A tier. When I got back from the dungeon, I decided to complete some newbie guides, and for literally emoting once, I received this unnecessarily overpowered ring. Just look at my damn stats before and after I equipped it. I actually can't believe they're giving away this shit so early on. So it goes without saying that at that moment I decided to immediately ban this raid from the run.
Yep, you're banned. Have a good night.
This is basically gonna become a trend. Anything that can give you an unfair advantage way beyond what you're supposed to have on your current level is not allowed. Also, you may have noticed that I've put on the government mandated default costume. And as much as I don't like it, I've decided that it will not be banned for the run. But this is the only costume that won't be banned. Since some of the costumes available in the cash shop give you way better extra stats if you take out your wallet, it wouldn't be fair to allow them, so yeah, no pay to win here. And since I'm on the topic of pay to win, I'm gonna go out and elaborate on that role. Not only are the cash shop costumes banned, everything from the cash shop is banned, with the exception of one item, the revival skulls. Wouldn't want anyone to just go and buy all the OP potions and basically never die, right? Upon reaching level 4, I unlocked a new skill called Hammer Strike. Remember when I was talking about heal attack and said that we didn't have any ways to knock down enemies? Well, now we do. By itself, the skill does very little damage, but it compensates for that with its ability to consistently stun enemies without any cooldown. And combining this with heal attack makes for an incredibly powerful combo, considering the resources I have available. Its downside is that some enemies can't be knocked down, which makes the skill useless against them, so I will put it in B. Right here you can see the moment where I was glad I moved away my skills, because I instinctively pressed on the quick slot by accident. Fortunately, it only resulted in me wasting a potion, otherwise I would have to restart the dungeon. Some more baby easy fights later, I unlocked 2 more skills. Let's start with Poor Kick. This skill actually goes into the same rotation as Hammer Strike and Heal Attack. I must apologize because I don't remember if you actually need it to make the heal attack work. But essentially first you stun your enemies, then you knock them down and finish off by stepping on them. Because of this, it has the same downsides as the other skills in the rotation, which is relying on actually being able to knock down the enemy. It also goes in B. The last combat skill that we'll get for a while is Charge Missile. To activate it, you have to hold down the attack button for 1.5 seconds, before you can launch it at your enemies. At first this skill seems great. Unlike the other skills I've listed, it can actually be leveled up, having 344% attack at max level, which makes it the second strongest skill available to me. It also has somewhat of an AoE, and has ranged attacks, allowing for satisfying pulls like this. But what's bad about it is literally everything else. The biggest problem with it is that it has negative resistance to interruption. As I've mentioned before, to actually use the skill, first you need to charge it. But if you get as much as breathed on while doing that, the skill would get cancelled and there's nothing you can do about it. And if you just so happen to get afflicted with a DOT debuff like Shock, Burn or Poison, don't even try to use the skills because guess what? That also cancels it. And if you magically do manage to meet all the necessary criteria for the skill to successfully charge, there is no guarantee that it will actually do anything. This has been a consistent problem for me trying to use the skill. For example, here you can see that my crosshair is orange, which means the enemy is in the skill's radius, but it still goes through them like a purple fart. I'm gonna give you a bit of a spoiler and say that this skill started to work way better in the later stages of the challenge, which is the only reason I didn't put it in D tier. I have no clue what the fuck its problem is. I have a theory that it might be very ping reliant, which was very unfortunate for me. Anyway, the most controversial skill of the run goes into C tier. And I'm only saying that looking back with hindsight. Wait, I guess I should also mention this skill, Counterspell. And the reason I forgot it is because there isn't really much to say about it. The skill can only be activated after your character was knocked down, which allows you to counterattack and stun enemies for a second. It sounds good, but from my personal experience, I didn't get to benefit from this skill that much. First up, because my character ended up being surprisingly hard to knock down. And even if I was, the enemies weren't always in my attack radius, which is kinda small on top of that. In other words, very unreliable. D tier. In total, it took me 43 minutes to complete Mana Reach. In a normal playthrough, I'd say it would take around 30 minutes give or take. Like I said, the tutorial town is piece easy no matter what you do. But don't worry, things are about to change relatively soon. Despite what I just said, the beginning of Calderock is far from difficult. Because of this, I will also be skipping over those dungeons. Since some asshole at Identity decided that Calderock doesn't need any waypoints, this is where I started to use my mount. But it wouldn't be until later that I realized the mount the server gives you actually has some extra stats I've decided were banned from the run. So after I discovered that, I've added a new rule. No mount stats allowed. But here's the thing, I'm still allowed to use a mount to traverse the city. So if a mount gives stats, I will have to get rid of it before entering a dungeon. This rule was added when I was given a bird that doesn't have any extra stats, so the moment you see it, you know the rule is in action. At level 15, I've unlocked my first specialization, so before doing anything I went to activate it. By the way, in the comments of my farming only video, I saw a suggestion of a challenge where you have to get to max level without getting a specialization. I must admit that I had the idea to do the blunt force trauma run way before posting the farming video. So, as I'm writing this part of the script when I'm way deep into blunt force trauma, I am 100% confident that the no specialization run is not only possible, but it would also be way easier than you would expect. So hey, I hope you'll enjoy this challenge instead. Anyway, now that this tangent is over, you must be wondering which specialization I will actually get. As a Smasher main, I already knew that I would pick Force User because, oh, I'm gonna use some Force, alright? On a serious note though, the reason I'm picking Force User is because compared to the Elemental Lord, this path has way more passive skills, which are essential for this challenge. But the main reason was this skill in particular, Force Shield. Anytime you get hit, it has a 10% chance to activate a shield that will negate the hit which activated it. But that's not all. After that it will activate an effect that lasts 20 seconds, which halves taken physical and magic damage. Gives massive knockback resistance, and besides all that, during the first 10 seconds it will gradually heal your HP by 10%. Needless to say, Force Shield was crucial for this run. I will not be surprised if it's actually the best passive skill in the game, because the defensive utility it provides is insane. My character also sounds like she says "Force Shield" when using it, which was very relatable. Easy S tier. But Serene, you say? Don't you need to unlock another skill first before you can unlock Force Shield? And you'll be right about that. Although I have no idea why that's a thing, because these two skills are completely unrelated. To get Force Shield, I will have to get myself some Linear Array first. But, as we all know, Linear Array is an active skill, which means I'm not allowed to use it. So, what am I gonna do? Well, the rules say that I'm not allowed to use active skills, but they never said I'm not allowed to unlock and level them up. So with that, I just put Linear Array in the naughty corner with the rest of my active skills and never looked at it again. Along with Force Shield, I've also unlocked two other passive skills, Gravity Sphere and Void Blast. Let's talk about them. Both of these skills activate after dashing and have the same exact attack scaling. If you press right click, you will get Void Blast, which will knock back all the enemies around you and deal substantial damage. If you press left click, you will get Gravity Sphere, which will make your character spit out a black big exploding ball, which also deals pretty good damage considering this run. Now, as soon as I unlocked these two skills, I immediately went out to test them in my following dungeon. And what I've discovered is that they're incredibly good. So good in fact, that they made the rest of the skills I've mentioned before, not counting the Force Shield, completely redundant. On top of having the ability to be leveled up to 6 times and good damage scaling. They also had relatively small cooldown, which means I could go through the entire dungeon just spamming these two skills and come out on top. Which is exactly what I ended up doing until I realized that these two skills are so good that they are too good to be allowed in this run. Yeah, I'm sorry, but this is not blunt force trauma at this point. This is magical trauma. These beginner dungeons were already so easy it was boring, but these two skills simply turned them into a snooze fest. Anyway, the new rule is this. No damage dealing passive skills start in first specialization. That way, skills like Force Shield are allowed, but Gravity Sphere and Void Blast aren't. Basically, if they have damage scaling in their description, they're banned. This is why this challenge is called blunt force trauma and not passive skills only. With that, I used my government-mandated skill initiation scroll and removed these two from my roster. You may also ask me, if I want this challenge to be true blunt force trauma, then why am I allowing charged missile but banning gravity sphere and void blast? Because unlike those two, charged missile is so shit that it requires actual skill to use, unlike them. And second, is because this challenge would be low-key impossible without it. But we'll get to that. Anyway, the timing of that decision could not be any better, because right after that I finally unlocked that base difficulty. And this is where I finally felt the first signs of blunt force trauma. Admittedly, I didn't have that many issues since I could still kill most enemies in 1 or 2 hits. But the boss surely became more noticeably harder compared to everything I had to deal with, and it would only get harder and harder from that point on. After finishing that dungeon, I finally remembered that skill heraldries exist, so I went to buy some from this lovely twink scholar. First thing I did was, of course, improving my force shield even further by giving it a buff duration increase. I don't remember why I decided to buy more heraldries only after completing another dungeon. By the way, I don't have anything to say about that dungeon, but after I did, I increased damage for my hammer strike. The next dungeon on my list was Magic Institute. For some reason, I remember it being way more annoying, but rewatching the footage it wasn't even that bad. My biggest complaint was that sometimes when I would be pressing space to perform the hammer strike, for some reason my input would literally not register. Boy, I sure do love pressing space and seeing nothing happen. But that problem was definitely not exclusive to this dungeon. One more dungeon later, I finally got tired of picking up items and got a minion. I should mention that minions get the same treatment as mounts in this challenge. To make the rules more clear, the allowed stat cap is in single digits. This one did have a stat bonus, but it was so insignificant that it might as well not be there. Anyway, I named him Freddy because I also got myself a heal attack and slap attack heraldries, which I had to equip later cause my level was too low. Which was a shame because right after that I was supposed to go to what I can say without a doubt is the worst dungeon in all of Calderock. For some reason, the devs decided to make this whole dungeon be covered in this reddish pink fog, which prevents you from seeing 5 steps in front of you. So I spent half of the time running around the place like a blind bat trying to find where the hell I was supposed to go. This place also had one of those asshole trolls which would be rolling around the place where you could barely dodge them because you literally couldn't see where the hell they were coming from. Oh, and you better not miss any enemies, because otherwise good luck finding them in these high school bathroom levels of vape fog. Oh yeah, and the boss was even more annoying. Thank God that the quest highlighted its side, otherwise even finding it would be unbearable. On top of all this, it was one of those enemies that couldn't be stunned and was unbelievably hard to even hit for absolutely no reason. I'm pretty sure this was the longest Calderock dungeon, because it took me over 9 minutes. Sometime later I unlocked my last rankable skill, Time Dodge, which is just an inferior version of Time Stop. Now, I don't know what the hell was wrong with the skill for me, but there would be multiple times where I would see the animation for the skill activate, but literally nothing would happen. I'm guessing that's because my ping delay was so long. By the time the game registered the skill, its effect would already be over. I'm pretty sure I could count the amount of times the skill actually worked on my fingers. And when it did, it was pretty much useless. Like, by the time I realized it actually did something, the enemies would shortly unfreeze. I actually have no idea why this skill took so long to unlock compared to the rest. Because it's just awful. Actually, it's so bad that I'm adding the F tier, just to place it where it belongs. There you go. With that, I have finished Calderock. In total, it took me around 2 hours and 20 minutes to complete it. Overall, it was still pretty easy, but the hint of challenge actually appeared closer to the end. But let me just say, no Calderock dungeon even came close to what I was about to experience upon arriving in Saint Haven. The first Saint Haven dungeon that greeted me was Abandoned Welton Hollow, and upon seeing my first enemies I was instantly met with a reminder that Dragon Nest was definitely not intended to be played like this. You are constantly attacked by a horde of mobs that would make the Black Friday crowd pale in comparison. And when you only have a very limited way of dealing with that horde, things quickly become very difficult. But, as you can already expect, the boss was a special pain in the ass. Not only would it fly all over the place like a headless idiot it is, it would also constantly shock me. Which, as I mentioned, basically makes me one skill short. The best strategy I suggest is waiting for this idiot to freeze like this and start hitting like your life depends on it, which it kinda does. You could also try stunning him with Hammer Strike, which does not always work. And if I thought that the 9-minute dungeon was long, this one took 12 and a half. Bear in mind, this is the very first Saint Haven dungeon, compared to the longest Calderock dungeon. I think you can expect what I have to deal with here. This was also the point where I began to physically keep track of every dungeon I've been to, so I would know for sure which ones were repeats. Yes, I know my handwriting is ass. After returning from the dungeon, I decided to do something no new Dragon Nest player ever has to: buying and enhancing armor before reaching max level. Because I quickly realized that if I don't start doing that, my death counter will be even higher than it ended up being. Also, I'm gonna give you this advice, which I didn't realize up until later in the challenge myself. Don't buy weapons from the blacksmith unless you really have to. There is a good chance you will get one for free after completing a dungeon anyway, so once again, don't repeat my mistakes. Anyway, the Dark Mine required me to do literally nothing, like to the point where I don't even know why that dungeon exists. I thought that they would make me go there for real later, but they never did. Well, one less thing for me to worry about. I got more potions, got a cash shower, and went into my next dungeon, Dark Overlord Keep. There was nothing much to say about it except for the Oh, for fuck's sake. Yeah. So what I kinda forgot about are these annoying motherfuckers. When they decide to randomly spawn, there is nothing else I could do than patiently wait for them to go away. Because there was absolutely no way in hell I was defeating that. I absolutely hated every second I saw that dreaded portal popping in. Because these guys hit like a fucking truck. So you better hope that they spawned in an area where you have enough room to run away. Otherwise you're cooked. Now to the boss. This one is actually the exact same bitch from the previous dungeon, but in red. And instead of shocking me, it burned. But it's been a while since I've been to this particular dungeon, so I totally forgot about a very important mechanic it has. You see those 3 stooges over there? Well, I thought that they were just one of those extra trash mobs every boss has around them. But actually, you have to defeat them first. Otherwise, they will respawn the goddamn boss. And guess who forgot about that part until they already defeated the boss? Yes, I had to fight this bitch twice. At first I thought that my blind dumbass didn't read the pop-up explaining this mechanic. But turns out the reason I didn't read it was because there was no pop-up. Since for some reason the game expects you to know that you're supposed to do this. Even though in 99% of dungeons, the minor enemies die as soon as the boss does. And in the rest of the 1%, the enemies never resummon the fucking boss. I guess later Identity did learn their lesson, and in every following dungeon, all of the mechanics you need to know are actually explained. But come on, the game has been out for 14 years. Is it really that hard to update this place and add literally one line of text? Anyway, I know it might seem silly to say, but after this dungeon I felt actually physically exhausted, like I'm not even kidding. This dungeon made me feel nauseous, to the point where I had to take a break. My vision was blurry, eyelids heavy even. I must also say that this dungeon was definitely not the only one that made me feel this way. For some reason, starting Saint Haven, this challenge unironically made me feel tired. Like it made me sleepier than any ASMR video ever could. So yeah, if you're having trouble falling asleep, totally recommend. Anyway, after a 2-hour break, I returned to the game to torture myself a bit longer. By the way, I filmed this part on the exact same day as the entirety of Mana region Calderock. That was the last time I would ever complete a city in one day. So, let's talk about the Forsaken Islet. This place introduced the Cobalt enemies. Their biggest issue is that they keep leaving these annoying traps all over the place, and they are very easy to trigger. Which would maybe be more manageable if they didn't put 50 billion of these guys all at once. I'm not even kidding, there was a moment where I triggered a trap and that sent me flying right into another trap. I should also mention 2 other types of recurring enemies: cannons and lizards. The moment you see a cannon, your first priority should always be getting rid of it as soon as possible if you don't want to get your ass blasted. Now the lizards. They're pretty annoying. Firstly, because they have shields, but luckily they break after a few hits, so that's still manageable. But secondly, because they keep backing away like a bunch of pussies, so you have to constantly chase them all over the place hoping you can land one hit. So you better believe me when I say, when you get the chance to crush them like a fucking bug, you better take it immediately. So anyway, the boss of this place was this giant overgrown weed. And if you thought the cobalt traps were annoying, this thing does the exact same, but somehow worse. My advice would be that if your charged missile or whatever equivalent of it you have actually works, don't do what I did here and just spam it while trying to avoid it spitting at you. And yeah, I literally have no idea how you're supposed to dodge the roots, but that may be skill issue on my part. Next up was Fortress of the Dark Overlord. And how I'm glad that this is a low-level dungeon. The first part was honestly manageable, but the second one was probably the closest to an actual battlefield we ever got here. Do I even need to mention the hordes at this point? But it all got worse the moment literal Satan had spawned. Whole 4 of them. Just look at this, what the fuck do y'all expect me to do in this situation? The boss was actually not as annoying as I expected him to be. One of his attack patterns was actually very predictable and easy to dodge, and the others were pretty tankable.
Oh my god, bro. Oh, hell no, man.
Here is my advice to you. Do not complete this dungeon like I did. I could easily have just restarted the dungeon 10 times and collected all the JO crystals, but for some reason my dumbass decided to be brave, and now we're here. But if you do decide to follow in my footsteps for some unknown reason, remember that you can skip most of the enemies on the first part as long as you defeat all the ones on this platform. So anyway, remember the boss from the worst Calderock dungeon? Yeah, this one is basically the same thing, but worse. And you can actually see him this time. The main difference between them is that this one kept doing this laser attack, which was not only low-key impossible to dodge in my situation, but also hurt like a bitch. Let me just say that I was very glad Force Shield exists. It was the only reason I didn't die during this. You may have noticed this buff that I randomly got while doing my thing in the city. Honestly, I didn't even notice this until rewatching the footage. I don't even know why I got it, but trust me when I say that I don't think this buff had very much of a difference for me. And since we're on the topic of buffs, let me update the rules real quick. Random Saint Haven buffs like this, or I don't know, like the wedding buff for example, are allowed. But I am banning the Gas Dragon buff, cause you aren't even supposed to be in Red Lotus Palace yet, what the hell are you doing there? Okay, so the next dungeon was pretty mid. The only thing that I have to say is that this part requires you to just kill the lizards, like, that's it. Don't even bother with the rest of them. Moving on. Here you can skip enemies in the second part. Just run to this corner, kill the mobs there, and you can move on. When you see the boss, don't even try to hit him until you go through the second portal, cause you can't. Here, try your best to avoid his attacks, otherwise this happens. Luckily, he stops doing it as soon as you break his shield, and from there he just turns into a little beta cock trying to push you away with a 5% accuracy rate. Remember how I mentioned there will be dungeons where a hero is forced to join you? Well, here it is. Our guest this time is Gerant, starting off with a bugged entrance. And if you think that his presence means I won't have to do anything here, unfortunately you're wrong. The good thing about this dungeon is that most of it is completely skippable, but that also means Gerant will be stuck fighting unnecessary mobs while I'm on the other end of the dungeon trying to make actual progress. Which is exactly what ended up happening. At least Gerant compensated for this experience by killing the boss for me in like 3 hits, which is certainly faster than it would have taken me. But after defeating the boss, the dungeon wasn't over because now came the part where Gerant would get his ass beat by Wellscoot. And yeah, I was also helping. Kinda. Shortly after that, I leveled up enough to reach my second specialization. But I didn't end up getting it until way later. At first I didn't even think I should spend time on that, because the skills from the second specialization would be kinda useless to me, and the stat increase was so insignificant that it was honestly funny to look at. But then my friend pointed out to me that the first class master gives the 50% intellect increase, which means 50% more damage. So I did end up getting the specialization, but it would be a while until we get there. For now though, we're going to the Islet Core. If you're wondering where I got another buff from, it happened because I picked up the Spanish Throne from the daily rewards and didn't notice the effect it gives. But if that makes it any better, the stone didn't really help me. And yes, after this dungeon I decided to ban the use of the charred Geo crystals like these, so you won't see me using one again. Anyway, I was not prepared for these goddamn pirates. They blasted my ass so bad that my whole laptop froze for a solid couple minutes and my whole HP bar was just gone.
Wait, dude, it's getting hot in here. Oh my PC!
But what else did I expect when I brought a staff to a gunfight? In this part you're supposed to kill these lizards, which sounds easier than it actually was. Don't do what I did and instead try to lure them out one by one. Otherwise, this will happen. Yeah, I am not proud to present my first death of the run. And unfortunately, it's definitely not gonna be the last. And if I didn't get enough of the annoying lizards already, the boss of this place is just one more breed of lizards for me to hate. It has every trait of its dumbass brethren. 3-hit shield, backing away like a little bitch, and the stick it constantly tries to poke you with. Luckily, I somehow managed to lure it into a corner where it couldn't back away. Although I really wish it could fall off this cliff instead. I managed to slowly chip away at most of its HP before it unfortunately killed me first.
What?
Thanks, I hated every minute of that. But if I thought that was bad, the next dungeon would be way worse. I already knew I wouldn't have a fun time before I even entered it. And not only because of the bombs flying at me and shit constantly falling from the ceiling, but because this dungeon has not one, but two awful bosses. And if it wasn't bad enough, one of them was electric and the other one was a fire type. So in other words, two of my least favorite types of enemies tag teaming me at once. One of them is literally named Karen. I can't make this shit up. Anyway, I focused on the blue one first since I decided her attacks were way more annoying than the red ones. And I was right, because she kept spamming these blue balls, which gave me a permanent shock debuff. And if it wasn't bad enough, the other one kept trying to blow me up. Technically, I could actually leave after killing the blue one. But the reason I didn't was because if I left the dungeon now, it couldn't be counted as completed. And if I had to go back here again, which actually did happen, I would have to fight this blue ball in hole on the base again, and I certainly didn't want any of that action. Even though the red one constantly kept me in a burning state, she was much more manageable. And by manageable I mean I only died to her once. So guess how long this whole dungeon took? 21.5 minutes. Why did you make me go there? I hate you now. The Dark Overlord's tower was more of the same shit but different flavor. I thought the big goblins would be more of an issue, but they ended up being easily stunnable, so don't even worry about them. I didn't even complete this dungeon, I just left the moment I was allowed to. Which was honestly a great move on my part, because I don't think they ever sent me there ever again. But as if the game thought I didn't hate my life enough after the road to Death City, which is a very appropriate name by the way, it sent me to an even worse dungeon. You know what, I'm just gonna get straight to the boss because everything else pales in comparison. As you can see, I was having a terrible time. Not only because she kept flying all over the place, which makes her even harder to hit, but because she literally farts on you with sleep gas, and if you can't evade in time, you have no other choice but to lie there like an idiot. I don't know whose barely disguised fetish is to blame for this, but I will. Let me just say that it took me a while to discover the strat, but I did, so listen up. First, you have to kill all the red ones. When you do, zoom in and get as close to the boss as you can and start hitting. Yeah, I know this angle is sus as fuck, but trust me on this one. As soon as you see her start doing this animation, immediately dash forward, and when you're safe, go back and repeat the process until she's dead. Remember the road to Death City and how it took me 21.5 minutes to kill 2 bosses? Now, it took me 30 to kill 1. But trust me when I say there is worse, much worse awaiting me. After this experience, I decided to change my title to Survivor, which I'd say was far more appropriate. Now, this is where I must admit that at this point I took a long break from this challenge for reasons. It's been so long in fact that during this time I've replaced my ancient 12-year-old laptop with a brand new PC. Yes, the entire first half of this challenge was done on a decade-old Lenovo laptop. So when I launched the game on my fresh hardware and was impressed with the speeds, for some reason I thought that my default graphics card PC could handle Dragon Nest on high graphics. What, I may have had the funds for a new PC, but I never said I had enough on RTX. At first everything was fine, but as soon as I loaded into the dungeon I got humbled so bad. And let me just say, this was certainly a dungeon to welcome me after a month-long break. And yes, if you are wondering, I've completed this entire dungeon with FPS like this and ping like this. This is truly a moment. I don't even like this dungeon in a normal playthrough, so you could imagine how it went in here. The FPS was actually so bad that after the dungeon I began tweaking and started seeing FPS in real life. I don't even know what the hell that means and how to explain it. Everything just seems so smooth, I don't fucking know. Yeah, this experience made me insane. Not only because this dungeon is basically going to the same place 3 times, but mainly because of the boss. First, let's take a look at that DPS. Yes, starting this dungeon, all the boss battles became like this. And not only that, this also happened on an electric boss. Let me just say, I would need all of my revives. On top of that, defeating this boss had no viable strategy I could think of, unlike the previous one. So, what do you think I decided to do? Well, I think I realized that you get hit less while you're jumping, so my go-to attack was Hammer Strike. Yes, the one with the smallest damage scaling. So, anyway, guess how long this whole dungeon took me? Almost an hour. And I absolutely hated every second of it. Oh yeah, I guess it's also been so long that my dog died. Rest in peace, Freddy. In the next dungeon, I got hardcore trolled by a raider, because I genuinely thought this was a regular mob until it wiped out my HP bar in one hit. At this point, my main strat dealing with the hordes was spamming Hammer Strike until I could stab some of them to death. I admit, this strat was not very good, since the enemies that were not caught up in my Hammer Strike were really good at draining my HP. It works way better if you have around 2 stunnable enemies left. Anyway, for some reason the game decided to bless me with 2 raiders this dungeon, as if the hordes of mobs weren't enough on my plate. Yeah, how I mentioned how much I hate these annoying shitheads. So, you might be surprised to hear that for once, but I actually didn't hate the boss. The 2 groups of enemies you have to fight first were actually worse than the boss itself. Okay, so the first thing you do is get rid of all the minions. Then, all you basically do is just hit the boss while trying your best to dodge the 2 attacks it has. Well, he gets another after his HP reaches around 50%, so just run away as soon as he starts it. Also, there was one crucial thing I noticed while fighting this boss. I don't actually know how common this knowledge is, and I'm kinda embarrassed it took me so long to realize this. Anyway, what I found out is that your special attack is faster if you hold down one of the movement keys. Now, this made me curious, so I went to check if this also works on other classes. And to my absolute shock, I've discovered that it doesn't. Yes, turns out this trick only works if you play as a sorceress. At first I felt dumb for not noticing it sooner, but now I feel like I've just discovered a hidden mechanic. I mean, just look at this. I don't know if anyone will ever actually find this useful. I guess if you also want to try the blunt force trauma challenge, or maybe it has some use in PvP, I don't freaking know. But I thought it was cool to discover this. This dungeon took me close to 50 minutes, but at least the boss didn't make me feel miserable, which is always a treat in this challenge. I thought the next dungeon was also gonna be a breeze, even though it's one of my least favorite ones. because it would also be accompanied by Gerald. But...
Salam alaikum, alaikum salam. Échale salsa. Dale picante. Échale salsa, dale picante. Échale salsa, dale picante. Échale salsa, dale picante.
yeah. Canonically, Gerald is like on 5 HP in this dungeon, and it really shows. My guy would constantly be stuck in some corner fighting the 3 enemies that did find him in there. At one point, he was legit fighting the cliff because he could not figure out how to get to the enemies that were on said cliff. And when one of the ice lasers finally knocked some sense into him and got him unstuck, I kid you not, instead of fighting the enemies that were literally surrounding him, he walked past all of them to instead hit those cannons on the cliff he's been trying to reach from the ground. I can't make this shit up. I honestly think the whole game was tweaking out by that point. Talk to who? Talk to who? What the fuck? Eventually, we did manage to get to the next area. But will you believe me when I say that this wasn't even the most ridiculous part? I let John take care with the enemies at the start while I went a bit deeper. Cause I figured that would be faster. John, please attack more than once in 10 seconds. When we finally wiped out the horde with all combined effort, I was ready to proceed as planned, but then... Yeah, for some reason Gent was just standing there like a total idiot, not moving an inch. For a moment I even thought that my game disconnected, but for once my connection was fine. So, since out of the 2 of us he was the one dealing actual damage, I tried luring the enemies from the next area to him. And when they got close enough, he actually reacted. But when I thought that I finally got him unstuck, something unbelievable happened. At that point, I began thinking that during that battle, Wells could not only took Jared's second eye, no, Wells could also gave him brain damage. Okay, let's go. What the fuck? Why are you going back to that? Bro, I genuinely have no idea what the hell happened here. But ever since getting to this point in the dungeon, bro has been glued to that area and hadn't moved since. I don't know if his pathfinding is just ass or whatever. But I came to an unfortunate realization that I will have to finish the rest of this area alone. Yeah, I always thought Westwood was better, but this just sealed the deal for me. Gerant. More like Jer ain't. So I went off and finished the rest of the area myself. How did it go? As well as you'd imagine. You can see this is the point where I began relying on the charge missile more and more. And honestly, I'd say the later stages of the challenge would actually be impossible without it. Sure would be nice if the skill didn't require full moon to use. The real pain in the ass though came close to the end of the dungeon, cause the whole pirate crew was after me. So this is what I did. I managed to get rid of most of them and later slowly led away the remaining ones while missiling them until I could stunlock the remaining enemies. Also, apparently if you take too long to kill the enemies, you can see the ship swimming off into the cliff textures. Nice. Okay, I got rid of the biggest threats. Now just to deal with these stragglers on the ground. I'm sorry, what? Yeah, I don't know what the hell happened here, but I guess the skeleton was laying there for so long he became one with the ground and turned invincible. I tried literally everything I could to kill it. I even decided to make an exception and break the main rule of this challenge. But even that didn't work. Yes, this absolute asshole was the only thing blocking me from getting to the boss and finishing the dungeon. I cannot understate how fucking frustrating that was. My only option was quitting and restarting the entire dungeon from the very beginning. At that moment, I decided to think over my situation. Even if that absolute fiasco did not happen to me, the boss fight would still be relatively easy since Gerard would be there. So I made a difficult decision to count that dungeon as completed so I could redo it on easy. Yeah, I understand how lame this sounds, but trust me, I did not feel good about having to do that either. So, lesson learned. If you see those skeletons, kill them immediately, if you don't want to be softlocked like I was. So I went back and redid the entire dungeon on easy. And yeah, Giant was still standing there. Luckily, he does get magically teleported to the boss area. Although that would have been much more useful if I was still playing on Abyss. Let me just say that completing this dungeon did not make me feel satisfied at all. Which is exactly why I went to a different one right after. And let me tell you, there were many contenders for the worst dungeon in Hall of Saint Haven. But this one, boy, this one takes the fucking cake and shoves it down your throat.
That's what you get! That's what you get!
The dungeon itself was still manageable, except for that one moment. Fuck. No, bruh. Besides this, just missile nest with the whole thing and try your best not to die because you're gonna need every last one of those revives really soon. As you can see, this is a fire boss, so say bye bye to charge missile. I'm gonna say it right away. Don't even try to kill any of those minions, because when you do, even more will spawn in their place. And yes, every last one of them will keep spamming these goddamn text boxes, as if showing them once wasn't enough. But if you thought that this was the extent of their annoying traits, these wannabe creepers will constantly try to blow you up. There is one good thing about this boss. It's stunnable in the first half, so that's what I did. I hammer striked it and just prayed none of my moves would be interrupted. But that was only liable until the 50% HP phase activated. What's the strat now? Well, I hope you have enough revives. As soon as the second phase activates, the boss starts doing this, and it hurts a lot. You can still stun him if you're lucky enough, but it's nowhere near consistent anymore. So my best option was hoping that I stunned him while having to tank every hit. You can imagine how well that went. Wait, what am I talking about? You don't even have to imagine. This one boss blew literally through all of my revives. At that point, I was really glad I happened to catch a bit of cash showers during my playtime. Otherwise, it would be over. It wasn't even my longest dungeon ever, but it was certainly one of the worst experiences of this challenge, hands down. So after that, I got the first-hand confirmation that my 5 daily revives will not carry me through the rest of the run. So I dedicated the next available cash shower day to saving up enough to buy the 90 revives discount pack. But what also happened is that I guess I had also gotten enough cash showers to gain a VIP bonus. The bonus itself didn't give me a significant stat increase, but it did give me 1 extra daily revive, so that was useful. The Ghost of Isolated Forest did not require me to go through all of it, so don't do that. The one thing worth mentioning about it was the fact that when I was trying to stunlock these two Cyclops, I realized that I was literally punching them in the balls until I basically killed them with extreme CBT. So yeah, that's all you have to know about this dungeon. Besides it, the following dungeons were just repeats, but I didn't think much about that since I knew they were leading up to something big. I have been anticipating this fight for a very long time, ever since before I even started this challenge. It was the main reason I decided to buy 90 revives in bulk, because I knew I would need as many as possible. Of course, I am talking about the Sea Dragon fight. I already beat it many times before, and although the story mission is quite different from the next version, I kinda knew what to expect. I could already imagine how funny it would be when the Sea Dragon activates the Curse of Silence, which wouldn't affect me since I can't use skills anyway. I wondered how many times I would actually die in this run, or how long it would take me. Legit, I was ready to spend like 2 hours beating that dragon over the head. Man, this is going to be the most legendary battle in Dragon Nest history. Okay, I'm fully prepared. Let's see what you got. I'm sorry, what? I'm sorry, what? Wait, that doesn't count. Wait. So when I first saw this, I thought that something went terribly wrong. So this is what I thought happened. Since my previous dungeons were repeats and I did them on easy, it automatically chose the difficulty based on that, since there was no way to adjust it yourself. Luckily, I did manage to restart the quest, and after making sure the difficulty was set on Abyss, I went back there and what do I see? That it was automatically set on easy, no matter what you do, and there was absolutely no way to change it. You know what? I'm just gonna let you see my honest reaction to that information. It's automatically on easy, I can't do shit about that. What the fuck? That is bullshit. That is absolute fucking bullshit. Oh my fucking god. Who decided to do that? Who the fuck at Identity decided that this is a good idea? Why can't I fight the fucking dragon all by myself? What the fuck is this piece of shit? Who decided this is a good idea? I fucking hate all of you. Not you, Westwood. You know, right now, I could go on a whole tangent as to why this goes in the top 10 most brain-dead decisions of Identity. But since this video is already getting ridiculously long, I'm gonna leave this topic for another day. So instead, I'm just gonna explain how stupid this is as quick as I can. If you do actually pay attention to the dialogue in the quest, you will notice that literally everyone has been hyping out this sea dragon like you're gonna be fighting the death itself. We literally saw it kill Gerant, for God's sake. And that was even before this thing turned into a dragon. Of course it should be scary and menacing. The entire Saint Haven was basically leading up to this fight. So why the fuck did the actual fight was so easy? It took us literally 2 mouse clicks. And even though I've been screaming about the easy difficulty, that isn't actually the biggest problem. Because guess what? In a regular dungeon, even on the easy difficulty, the bosses take much longer to beat than this absolute fucking joke of a fight. Okay, so I'm recording this part later because I was taking a break raising my lance here. And I just so happened to get to the same point where I've noticed something I didn't before. You see, when you go into this quest area, turns out you are given this little inconspicuous buff. And do you wanna know what this buff does? Well, it seems that Identity thought that locking the difficulty to easy and making the dragon killable in 2 hits was still too hard for the poor helpless players. So they added a buff that makes it so that the dragon can't even lower your HP, even by 1%. At this point, this is just insulting. Like, genuinely insulting. Like, what the fuck do you even think I was doing to get to this point in the first place? It's like sending a pro cyclist to the Olympics and giving him one of those bikes for 3-year-olds with training wheels. Genuinely, what the absolute fuck were they thinking? And you know what is the cherry on this absolute shit Sunday? The fact that this is the very last Saint Haven fight. Yeah, we're finishing this whole area on this bullshit. Instead of the grandiose fanfare, it ended with a quiet, dry fart. So let's see. How long did Saint Haven take me? Around 10.5 hours. And to say I was disappointed for this whole area to end with this fucking bullshit would be an understatement of the century. I was so mad, in fact, that I didn't calm down until sometime into Lotus Marsh. Yeah, the gold dragons again. Guess who else is dead? The sea dragon, because apparently I was allowed to kill it with 1 fucking tap for some fucking reason. Talking about Lotus Marsh, that is our next and final stop of the challenge. So, with the biggest disappointment behind us, let's give it up to Florida. The reason I was postponing getting my second job specialization was because I was specifically waiting to get to this area. And my reason is that I don't want to go to this damn dungeon more times than I had to. So I was just waiting for both quests to send me there simultaneously. Now, if you've ever played as one of the first 4 classes ever added to the game, you know the pain of the second specialization. The game really said study, because they would send your ass to the ancient library 3 times in a row. Yes, I know this was because at the time this was literally the only Lotus Marsh dungeon available, but that didn't make it any less annoying. But I guess we wouldn't have to worry about that anymore, because at some point they changed the quest to make you go there only once. Usually, I don't like it when the game gets easier, but for once, I think this is a change for the better. Good job, Identity. Before we actually get to the dungeon though, I should actually mention something else. Turns out, as a reward for completing the initial Saint Haven arc, you'll be given 100 of these potions. And you better believe me when I say that these potions were a godsend. Ever since I ran out of those starter 10 health potions, my only other option were these ones with an atrocious 120-second cooldown. Compared to that, the Orpal potion only has a 3-second cooldown. So heed my warning and save the Grimace shakes as much as you can, because oh boy, you will surely need them. Now, back to the ancient library. Guess what, we're gonna be at the ancient library a lot, so I guess let's just rip the band-aid off. Considering I don't have many good memories from this dungeon playing normally, I expected it to be absolutely dreadful. But to my surprise, I found this experience surprisingly fun. Yes, this challenge broke me so bad that now I find this enjoyable. From this point on, my strategy turned into a full missile nest, because the enemies became too strong for my hammer strike to tank. A few of them could still be stunned, but that could not be said for the big hordes. Also, don't do the same mistake like I did and get a heraldry for charged missile as soon as you get to Lotus Marsh, cause I didn't do that and that was really stupid. This was also the place that introduced me to a new bad type of enemy, the Dead Note. No, not Death Note, Dead Note. These particular ones were fire, so you know what that means. If they hit me, my DPS is basically dead, so that was fun to deal with. But not as fun as the Amber Staff. Yeah, do I even have to explain why I hate them at this point? Now, this is the part where I usually complain about the boss, but this time I actually have nothing to complain about. In fact, I'd say this was actually one of the, if not the most pleasant to deal with bosses of the run. Okay, listen up, because it's time to discuss war strategy. The most important thing you have to do is make sure the boss doesn't face you, because that's where all his attacks come from. So, as weird as it sounds, stay close to his ass. You should try to keep running until your dash cools down in case you quickly need to evade. Now, as soon as the boss enters one of its attack animations, start hitting as hard as you can. And when he starts trying to face you again, dash and repeat the same process until it's dead. Sometimes it will launch this ice missile at you, but just keep an eye out for it and run away from it until it despawns. With this, it is entirely possible to beat this whole dungeon without dying once. I couldn't do it because I didn't figure out the strats yet, but this genuinely surprised me. I thought Lotus Marsh would be more difficult than Saint Haven, since it's a higher level area. Well, I'd say it's a welcome surprise. But even though I ended up enjoying the dungeon, it still took me an hour and 10 minutes to complete, and my left hand went numb and I unironically felt dizzy. Yeah, I don't think you should attempt this challenge if you have iron deficiency. Now, the most attentive of you already noticed that in this dungeon, I've actually broke one of the rules. Did you see what it was? Yes, turns out my dumb ass forgot to dismount before entering the dungeon. And I honestly didn't even realize that until sometime after finishing. So, since I'm so forgetful, my punishment is that I'm not allowed to use a mount for the rest of this challenge. We are walking only now. Anyway, I finished my specialization. Honestly, it didn't really matter which one I picked since I can't use any of my skills anyway. But I still went with Smasher because, of course I would. For some reason, this part of the main quest was all in Korean, and if that didn't make things difficult to understand, the quest arrow was also not working. So I legit had to pull out Google Translate to try and figure out what the hell they want me to go. Eventually, I did find my destination, and it was this place. After being forced to go there once and return later on my second trip, I figured out that it would be best if I just finished the dungeon and get it over with. I didn't worry about the enemies as much as this countdown. I had no idea what would happen if the countdown reached 0 because I don't think I would have stayed long enough to find out. But since there was no way for me to finish that quickly, I was about to. And after the countdown ended, nothing happened. Yeah, I still have no idea what the hell it's actually supposed to do. My best guess is that it's an old dragon nest mechanic that was removed later. After the Sassy countdown area is over, we will get to the next one where you'll have to kill 100 enemies before you can proceed. And let me just warn you. Beware of the shadow bitches because they can wipe out your entire HP in one fart. And on top of that, turns out you have to kill all of them before proceeding, so deal with them first. When playing, I actually confused this dungeon with another one, so I was relieved to see this guy instead of the one I thought it was gonna be. Although this wasn't that great of a news, because now came the time for me to fight the Discord mod. And even though the Discord mod can never leave his gaming chair, don't let that fuck get your guard down. I quickly realized that melee attacks were not a good idea, since he had doing this, which comes with literally no warning. So it was Missile Nest again. The strategy here is similar to the Ancient Library boss, in that you have to stay away from its spawn. The difference is that now you shoot him from a distance. So as long as you do that, both laser attacks are pretty easy to evade, as long as no bullshit happens. The gravity field gives you plenty of time to evade it too, so get away as soon as you see it. When you get him to around 86, 65, 45 and 25 health, he will teleport into the center and summon a gravity vortex and a handful of minions. Don't try to hit him while he's doing that. When he's done, kill the minions and return to the previous rhythm. When he gets to around 50% health, he'll get a new move which will freeze you if you get too close. But if you know when it's coming, it's also easy to evade. Anyway, the boss was fine. The only annoying part was the bullshit laser that would somehow hit me when I was nowhere in its attack range. Overall, still better than the majority of Saint Haven. Now, I must warn you that the footage for the next dungeon has problems, because this was my first experience recording in OBS, and as you can see, it wasn't a good one. I don't know why this program hates me. Anyway, I will try to show you the good footage whenever I can, which is not much. Most of the dungeon is nothing of note, except for how unnecessarily tedious it is. So I'll go straight to this chamber. Here, the mini-boss you have to fight is determined by the enemies of which element you will kill first. After mulling it over, I decided that the earth enemies would be the least annoying to deal with. And I was right. I would have to repeat this dungeon a couple of times later, and I chose wind and water the following times to jog my memory. The wind boss was about what I would expect, but let me just show you what happens in the water chamber. Yeah, never pick the water chamber. Even though the earth chamber will probably be your best option, you still have to be very careful. Whatever you do, do not step on the green plates. Otherwise, you will have to fight a bunch of these annoying shitheads. And no, unfortunately, they do not die when you kill the boss. So I really appreciated that. So anyway, let's move past the train wreck and get to the boss already. Like the previous one, this boss also heavily relies on missile nest, which becomes standard by this point. Just don't stand in front of it and try to keep a safe distance, which is a debatable amount, and shoot. What's also important to note is that this boss can't just be hit whenever you want. No, you have to attack only when its mouth is open. Otherwise, you will deal an impressive sum of 1 whole damage. But what this boss is most infamous for is its mimic mechanic. At certain points in the fight, he will turn into a chest and make you guess which one is him and which one is a decoy. If you pick correctly, you may resume the fight right away, but if you don't, you will get a debuff. The thing is, I have absolutely no idea if there is any way to consistently tell him apart. All it's all RNG. And the RNG gods really hated me on that part. Although this dungeon didn't take me as long as the ancient library, it sure didn't feel like it. When rewatching the footage for this script, I've noticed a definite trend of a Lotus Marsh dungeon. Because for some reason, every new dungeon's experience becomes noticeably worse than the previous one. And now, this is where this trend culminates. I've been dreading this dungeon ever since I set foot in this town, and I already knew that if I hate a dungeon playing normally, the blunt force trauma can make that a dungeon 10 times worse. Of course, I'm talking about Dragon Follower Base. Now, I'm also gonna spoil it a bit and say that this is the last full dungeon I had to complete before reaching max level. The rest after that are all just repeats. So I'm gonna go out and admit that I honestly consider this the true ending of the challenge. Nothing leading up to it could even compare to the level of awful I experienced here. With that, let me welcome you to the worst and final dungeon of the Blunt Force Trauma Challenge. This entire dungeon is so bad that I think it deserves a full breakdown. So brace yourselves. As if deciding that this place is not gonna be atrocious enough, my charge missile skill decided to prove to me why it deserves the C tier placement and stopped working properly. Awesome. The next area introduced what I can only describe as the worst enemy type I ever had to deal with throughout this whole challenge. Remember when I was talking about the lizards, I said that they have shields, but at least they're breakable. Yeah, well these little fuckers went a step further and got themselves shields that don't break. So, if you manage to get your charge missile to work, now there is absolutely no guarantee that it would do anything. And guess what? The enemies aren't stunnable anymore. So all the hammer strike is gonna do is make sure you have no HP left. The following area has a field of these fire traps, which are baby easy to run through. But I must ask, why aren't they doing shit to the enemies? I skipped over this, but in Calderock there was a dungeon where you could use traps on the ground to damage enemies and stun them. Did Identity forget that they already have the code for that? Anyway, the area after that was pretty mid, so I'll actually skip it. But that could not be said about what awaited me after I was done with it. As soon as you go through that portal, a billion enemies will spawn on top of you, and you have a very limited area to avoid them. Just look at how fucking small this place is on the map. Oh, what's that? You think this place could be even smaller? Like galvanized steel apartment smaller? Don't worry. As soon as these fired gas traps start activating, you will have even less space you could move to. What? You thought that at least the enemies could also be affected by these traps? Of course not, silly. Why? 'Cause fuck you, that's why. Yeah, I could not describe it in words how absolutely dreadful this part was. And as if the awful enemies weren't enough, I was also treated to some complimentary serving of bullshit. What the fuck? Why did it teleport me all the way over there? What the fuck? Yes, your eyes did not deceive you. For some god-forsaken reason, I was teleported from a corner of this little area, right into an activated trap. And can you guess which enemy type was left for me to deal with when I finally managed to wipe out the rest? That's right, it were these absolute dickheads. But even though this whole area was utterly abysmal, it could not, absolutely not, compare with the boss itself. You might remember how I called the boss from Riverport Village a Discord mod. And yeah, I guess you could kinda see that, but it was still an odd choice of words. But the reason I called him that is because there is only one thing that is worse than a Discord mod. A Reddit mod. Once again, relying on melee attacks here would be a terrible idea. Trust me, I've checked. He starts out with several attacks which you should avoid, including the most wild shit I've ever seen. Which one do you think is worse? The e-girl farts or the hot Redditor breath? Anyway, his attacks probably wouldn't be as bad if he wasn't also jumping around like a fat toad. Wait, I'm sorry. Comparing this thing to a toad would be an insult to the amphibians. Also, this asshole must be using some dragon following magic, because he could not stop teleporting all over the place for absolutely no reason. Now, one of the things that makes this boss the absolute worst is his phases. The first one will activate when he reaches about 71% of health. He will teleport you into a different room with a bunch of mobs, and you will not be able to damage the boss until every last one of them is dead. This is also the moment where he unlocks a new move, where instead of jumping once, he will do that 3 times in a row. At the very least, there is a way to tell when he actually does this. Watch out for the moment where he gets enveloped in this black mist and run. Although at about 50% of health, he also gets another move, which uses the same black fog, so thanks for that brilliant game design. Anyway, when that happens, this bitch will pull out his monster can, and at first you won't even realize what it does until this happens. Okay, 70%. What the fuck? What the fuck just one-shot me? What was that? Yeah, as soon as you see him whip out that monster ultra, you better stay the fuck away until the buff is over, because otherwise he will literally insta-kill you. But if that wasn't bad enough, at around 40%, the second phase activates. And if you thought that the first one was bad, this one is pure definition of bullshit. First up, it throws in a bunch of tanky enemies, Of course, including our least favorite guest stars. And on top of all that, the whole place is littered with fire traps. So good fucking luck trying to evade not only this fat jumping bitch that takes up like 1/4 of the area, but also this army of morons. The least I could say about this part is that the traps don't apply the burn status effect. But trust me when I say that did nothing to help me. I am not exaggerating when I say that this area was the first time this challenge made me unironically gamer rage. But I think you would feel the same way if like 1/3 of your attacks wasn't going through for some fucking reason. And just to give you an idea how much this sucked, I died 4 times in this part alone. After I was finally free from that absolute hell, I thought that the worst part is over. But this fucking dungeon, just kept outdoing itself in the layers of shit. As soon as we returned from the main area, the boss decided to spawn some minions in this place. And guess which fucking enemies did he choose to spawn? I would like to formally take back everything I ever said about the lizards. This is my mortal enemy now. But wait, it gets worse. Until now, you may have been wondering what these 2 random totems even do. Well, ever since the end of the second phase, both of them now spew poison at random intervals, which makes the area available to me even smaller. Okay, this is what you should do from now on. Before you continue with the boss routine, I suggest killing all these bastards, or at the very least, get them to low HP, because otherwise, these shitheads will continue ramming into you until you die. And as far as I know, they don't respawn. After this, there will be no more surprises, if you don't count the occasional random bullshit that is. Finally, after what seemed like the whole 9 circles of hell, it took me a whole hour and almost 17 minutes to finally put this dungeon behind. I have never felt better knowing that I would never have to do that shit ever again. Like I said, the rest of the dungeons up until the end of the challenge were repeats of previous ones. So let me just show you a clip of me getting to level 99 from talking to Wellscoot. Wow, that was anticlimactic. In terms of individual dungeons, Lotus Marsh definitely had the least. It's not surprising that it took me only almost 6 hours. Well, this certainly took longer than I anticipated. Yeah, for you guys it's only been 4 dungeons, but for me there have been a lot of repeats. And you have no idea how happy I was for the easy mode take 2 rule. Cause without it, I think I would have actually snapped. So in total, if my math is correct, the entire challenge took me around a whopping 19 hours and 30 minutes to complete. Now, this is the part where you expect me to say how much I hated every second of it and how absolutely awful it was. But you may be surprised to hear that I genuinely can't tell you that. Even though certain bosses made me wish I could put my hands through the screen and strangle them. I can't say that the whole experience wasn't oddly enjoyable. It had never felt so rewarding to clean a dungeon in this game, and each level felt truly earned. That dopamine rush when I would defeat a boss after watching its HP go down by 1/10% per hit got me high. And the easy difficulty felt like a real treat, because you knew you worked hard for it, and now you can take a little break. Even though Dragon Nest was never intended to be played like this. This challenge gave this game a feeling that it had been missing for a very long time. I'd say that if you wanted to raise another character but got tired of the mindless grind and want an engaging experience, then this challenge is for you. Although, considering its actual physical effects it made me experience, I should probably say that don't try this at home if you have serious health issues. Like, you may be thinking I'm exaggerating, but I'm not. When I said it made me feel nauseous, I really meant it. But besides possibly making someone pass out, there is another thing I would like to address about blunt force trauma. And that thing is, would the challenge even be possible as free to play on an official server? Well, my answer to that is, depends on how much you hate yourself. If you still remember the rules, one of them states that the only cash shop item you're allowed to buy are the revive scrolls. And I did end up buying them in bulk, because 1. I forgot about other means of getting them, and 2. I had no idea how many I would need in order to complete this challenge. So my verdict is, it is possible to complete the challenges free to play, but you'll have to be way more careful than I was. Luckily for anyone else who's brave or insane enough to attempt this at home, this video is basically a blunt force trauma guide. So now comes the part where I round up some tips and tricks to help you get through it. First up, you'll get 20 revives for free after finishing the first act, which will either be Mana Ridge or Prairie Town. On top of that, you will get 5 revives, which will replenish every day. But what I completely forgot about is that you can buy more revives at the David shop. The newbie guide will give you at least 6 Warriors Essentials, and you'll get even more from story quests. Anyway, each one of them gives you 2,500 blood, sweat and tears, and 1 scroll is sold for this price. So you still better save up your resources, because you'll need the same currency to buy armor. Try your best to save all of your daily revives for the dungeon bosses, and save up the red specifically for these dungeons in particular. This tip I've mentioned before, but don't buy weapons from the blacksmith unless the RNG is really praying for your downfall. Also, the optimal time to begin buying and sharpening armor in the first place is starting Saint Haven. You won't need it earlier than that. Save your money. Another tip I have is, remember those 10 potions you get at the start of the game? Yeah, don't listen to the newbie guide and save them from when you really need it. Because once you run out of them, you won't be able to buy more of them. And the ones you can actually buy will make you wait for next Tuesday for their cooldown to replenish. And it will be a while before you get the Grimace shakes in the mail, so yeah, one last time, don't repeat my mistakes. With this, I'd say it is possible to complete the challenge, even as free to play. I'm actually very curious to see how good the other classes would be in this challenge, and which jobs would provide the best advantage. But I don't think I'm gonna check that out for myself anytime soon. So if any of you would like to see for yourself, please let me know how that went for you. And in case you'd like to give this challenge a try, but aren't ready for the commitment of 99 levels, I'd say Wander would actually be great in that case. He's gonna be your trial boy. I hope you enjoyed watching this video. Sub if you are starving for more Dragon Nest content. There aren't a lot of us left in the fandom, so like and comment if you're still here. Hope to see you next time. Peace out.